For this recipe, you need vital wheat gluten. This is the main ingredient in this recipe, so we're starting off with that. Then we're going to add in a little bit of tapioca flour, followed up with a little bit of chickpea flour, and we're just adding this into a nice big bowl. Then I'm going to add in a little bit of organic brown sugar, not very much, just a touch to add a little bit of sweetness, some garlic powder, some paprika, this will help give a color to it, onion powder, some salt, and this is a bacon seasoning. If you don't have this, you could use like liquid smoke, or you could just leave it out, or you could use like a smoky paprika. Use what you have. We're gonna add a little bit of olive oil, and then we're gonna add in some tahini and some low sodium soy sauce, and then I have vegetable broth here, which we're gonna slowly add in. You're going to need about 93 milliliters. I know that's such a bizarre measurement of vegetable broth, but that's just how the recipe worked out. So you're just going to mix this up with a fork until it kind of forms like a shaggy little dough. And I'm gonna slowly keep adding in the water so that way I don't add in too much, or the vegetable broth, sorry, not water. And this is what it looks like. And now you're going to knead this for 10 minutes. Yes, 10 minutes. You can do this in a stand mixer if you want, or by hand. I don't know, I like to knead things by hand sometimes. Sometimes I put in the stand mixer, just depends. But it should look something like this. Get it into a nice little cylinder shape, kind of looks like a potato. And then you're going to add in any remaining vegetable broth to a nice big pot. I started with 3 cups of water, and then I just added in more. Add your seitan in, add enough water so it's covered, and you're just going to let this simmer for 55 minutes. It'll look something like this, not a complete boil, just simmering over low. I'm gonna make our glaze, so it's just gonna be easy. Mustard, some more of that bacon seasoning just because I had it, maple syrup, a little bit of olive oil, and some brown sugar. This is like a pretty classic glaze for a dish like this. And then I'm just going to also prepare my little baking dish. So I'm going to take a few slices of orange and put them right on the bottom, and some rosemary, and then that's it. Easy, done. Our seitan is done, and we're going to take it out of our pot. Be careful, it's obviously going to be very hot. Place it onto a cutting board. I know it looks a little gross. It'll get better looking as we go. I'm going to start by scoring the top. This obviously provides the same look that ham has, and also allows those flavors to really get in there. Place it on top of your orange slices, and then we're going to add most of our glaze. I'm going to save a little bit just for later, you'll see. But just otherwise brush it over the seitan, and that's pretty much it. And yeah, just save this for later. Then I just decided to add in a few extra little sprigs of rosemary right around. Everything is just gonna smell really good in the oven. And then I just cleaned up my baking dish a little bit just so that stuff didn't like bake on there. And that's it. You're gonna bake this in the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 45 minutes. When it is done, the score marks will have opened up, as you can see, and it should be kind of like a crust on the outside, very crispy, and it should look something like this. And then I'm just going to brush that remaining glaze right on top. It'll just add some shine and pop right back into that vegan ham. And that's it. Now I'm just going to slice it up, and I would definitely serve this like on top with the orange slices and the rosemary. It makes such a nice smell, and it just really provides that, in my opinion, holiday, you know, December feel, because it's just things that are reminiscent of December and the end of the year. And it looks so beautiful, and I promise it's really, really good. If you're new to veganism, you might be a little weirded out by this, but just try it, okay? I promise it's really good, and now you can enjoy. So to start this off, we are going to shred up some artichoke hearts. A lot of vegan rib recipes will use jackfruit, and I absolutely hate jackfruit, so we're not using it around here. We're going to use artichoke hearts, but you can use jackfruit for this too if you want. It's really the same thing. The artichoke has a very similar texture and consistency and adds a nice meatiness to the ribs. So just shred them up so it looks something like this. Now in a bowl, we're going to add vital wheat gluten. Then we are going to add in some chickpea flour. This is going to help to make it sturdy and bind it. Then we're going to add in a bunch of seasonings. So we got some garlic powder, we've got onion powder, and then we have some salt and pepper, followed up by a little bit of paprika. And then just mix that up with your spatula. This will just help to, you know, get all the dry ingredients well incorporated. Next up, we're going to add in our artichoke hearts that we just shredded up. And then finally, some melted vegan butter. And my idea behind the melted vegan butter was to add some fattiness to the dish, and then about 2 to 3 tablespoons of water. So I'm just going to start mixing this with my spatula, and the artichoke hearts have a decent amount of water in them, so I actually ended up needing to use more Vital Wheat gluten. When you check out the blog post, it'll have the exact correct measurements and just tell you to add in all the Vital Wheat gluten from the start, but because I felt throughout the process as I was kneading this that I needed more Vital Wheat gluten, I was adding it as I went. It's really not a big deal, however, which way you do it. But in total, you will use 1.5 cups of Vital Wheat gluten. So I'm just kneading it, and I could feel that it was too wet because my hands were wet after I was done kneading it, and it just wasn't staying like together. Also, you're just gonna, you're gonna keep kneading it and keep kneading it for about 5 minutes, and the texture is going to change immensely. It's going to get very stretchy and striated. It's going to look different. I'm gonna show you in 1 second what the texture you're looking for is. So see how when I kind of pull it apart, that's getting that texture in there? That's the kind of end goal texture we're looking for that you'll get after kneading. And don't worry if some of those artichoke heart pieces pop out. It's like really not that big of a deal. So then we're going to cut it in half, and then we're just going to roll it out. Now you can really roll it in whatever shape. I was kind of going for a rectangle and ended up with a triangle, but it's fine. So I'm just going to like shape it into a kind of ball, I guess, with my hands. And then I'm just gonna take my rolling pin and I'm gonna roll it out to be about 1/4 inch thick. I kind of, like I said, I ended up with more of a triangular shape instead of a rectangle, but like it's really not a big deal. It doesn't really matter. The bigger thing is you just want the thickness to be equal amongst the whole seitan cutlet, I guess, if you will. Try not to have one part that's really thick and one part that's really thin. Like try to keep it more evenly distributed, but the end shape doesn't really matter. Do whatever shape you feel like doing. So once I have them nice and rolled out, it is now time to steam them. So you can put them in a steamer basket, or you can just do my lazy girl method of taking a strainer and putting it over a pot and then just popping it in there and then putting a lid on top. So you're going to steam this for 20 minutes. This helps the seitan to plump up a little bit and start the cooking process. So then our seitan will look like this when it's done. It doesn't really look that much different, honestly, but you will feel that it's texturally different. It's a little bit sturdier, and please be careful as it will be hot. I had let these cool for a few minutes before touching them. So then we are just going to take a very, very sharp knife and we are going to gently score the top of these vegan ribs. So I'm not cutting all the way to the bottom. I'm just, like I said, I'm scoring it, and that way I can kind of have this rough outline of how the ribs are going to be. I did these in about, I would say, like 1 inch thick, like 1 inch width, if you will, but you can make them as thin or thick as you like. So it'll look something like this. When I pick it up, I can like sort of separate it, but they're still connected. They're not like falling off of each other, if that makes sense. So you're just going to do this to both cutlets, and like I said, you can make this as thin or thick as you like, but I would suggest doing about 1 inch. Then we're just going to brush the seitan with barbecue sauce. I use the one from Sweet Baby Ray's. It is vegan friendly, and just brush both sides of the seitan fairly well with it, get it nice and coated, but we're going to add a lot of layers and things of barbecue sauce here, so don't worry. And I really like to brush it on here. It makes it so much easier. Then we're going to brush the bottom of a 9 by 13 inch baking pan with the barbecue sauce as well. This will help to prevent any sticking. So then we're going to put our seitan in here, and then we are just going to add more barbecue sauce on here. So you're just going to give it some extra coating on top, and kind of like I got in between a little bit and underneath, and just coating it up nicely. And I will save a little bit of the barbecue sauce so that way I can use it later. We're going to pop this in the oven at 325 for 1 hour. Slow and low is the name of the game. So this is it after 1 hour. As you can see, it's starting to get caramelized. It's starting to get crispy. It's looking pretty good. And everything is staying like well connected in there because we didn't cut it or anything like that. And now you are going to take a nice big pair of tongs and just give this a flip. It's okay if it starts to fall apart a little bit, but so we're going to give this a flip, and then we're going to flip the other one. What we do to one, we do to the other. And don't worry if it sticks a tiny little bit, just yank it, it'll come. And then we are going to add more barbecue sauce to the back side of it that we just put on top, and a little bit underneath and a little bit on the bottom. And then we're gonna pop this back in the oven for a ½ hour. When it's all done, it will look something like this. It has those nice caramelized, crispy outer bits. Let that rest for about 5 minutes before you try and pick it up and touch it, just so it's not like so hot, and it'll look it'll look like this, and we are going to be ready to cut this in a second. And I just think they look so good and they smell so good. The house smells so good. So now just take your very sharp knife and just start cutting them up. And some of those bigger ones, like in the front, I actually ended up cutting in half. I mean, you can just cut this however you feel like cutting it. Is totally up to you. So they'll look like this when they're all done. They look so good, and they're chewy and they're meaty and they're really, really good. They're just like, I don't know, I really like them, and they have that glaze on the outside, and like I was very happy with them. I was very impressed with myself for this recipe. So that's really all you got to do. And these are really obviously best enjoyed when fresh, but I did have them the next day and they were really, really good the next day as well, like warmed up in the microwave. So they're good. I think they're great for summer. I think they're a fun dish to make, and even though they're a little bit time intensive, it's a lot of hands-off cooking because you're just throwing everything in the oven. So I think you all will really enjoy this one. We're gonna start this off by adding some mashed up cannellini beans into a bowl. You can use cannellini beans or chickpeas, doesn't really matter, and just make sure they're really nice and smooth and broken down. If they're not mashing up easily with the back of a fork, use a food processor. Then we're adding in the star of the show, our Vital Wheat gluten, the thing that makes all of this happen. And just mix it up. I know it seems silly, like it's not gonna come together, but just start mixing it until we form little clumps. Then we're adding in a bunch of seasonings, nutritional yeast, black pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, poultry seasoning. It's all listed down below, and just keep mixing that up. I'm not going to add in any salt because I'm using vegetable broth and the beans, and they have enough salt. If you're using low sodium veggie broth and low sodium beans, you might want to add some salt in. Then we're going to slowly start to add in our veggie broth. I only added in half a cup, and you want to do this slowly because you do not want the seitan to be too wet. So definitely do this slowly. It's better to do it slow because once it's too wet, you're kind of like screwed. You're gonna have to add in more Vital Wheat gluten. So do it slow. And then we can just start kneading with our hands. And you can see here it's still a little dry. Some of the pieces weren't being picked up, so I added a little more in, and that was enough. But seriously, I think it's better to just add it in slower if you're not sure. Don't just like dump the whole half cup in there. Do it in stages. So now you're gonna knead the dough for a few minutes, and you'll see it starts to turn really spongy. Some of the little pieces of the beans fall out. Don't worry about that, who cares? See how spongy it is? Like it bounces back so much. That's what you want. You don't want it to be too wet, and you want it to look like this. So now I'm gonna cut it into 4 pieces. And if you want to, you can freeze the seitan at this point, but we're gonna obviously keep going with the recipe. And we're just going to roll it out. So I rolled it out, and I'm gonna cut it into strips, and then I'm gonna cut those strips in half, so I get about 8 pieces from each ball. And we're just gonna form it into little nuggety shapes, you know, no really right or wrong way because it's a nugget, and it's something like this. So yeah, just cut it up, make little nugget shapes. And you want this to be thin because we're gonna boil these and they're gonna plump up. So don't worry, like the thinner is better. And they should look something like this when they're all done. Here are your little nuggets, your seitan nuggets. So let's bring this over to the stove where I have some vegetable broth and water boiling. This was 2 cups of veggie broth to 4 cups of water. And I'm just gonna use a slotted spoon to throw the seitan pieces in there. Boiling the seitan helps make it really soft, really good, gives extra flavor. And that's why I said I didn't want to add an extra salt because we're literally boiling it in the veggie broth. So this is it only after a few minutes, but you're gonna let it go for about 20 to 30 minutes and it's gonna look like this when it's all done. And you could see how much they plumped up and how much of that veggie broth they absorbed. The texture is completely different. So now I'm just gonna strain them out and put them on a plate lined with paper towel. Please be careful, these are gonna be really hot, don't burn your hands. The extra broth you could just dump, it's kind of gross. There's like bits of the seitan in there and stuff, and it's really not that much to do anything with. This is what it looks like when it is all done. Like I said, they're nice and plump and chubby. So now let's talk about breading. I have flour here that I mixed with some black pepper and chili powder. This is just regular all-purpose flour. We have some non-dairy milk, and then finally our breadcrumbs that have been seasoned with a bunch of things that I can't remember right now that are listed in the description box and the blog post. So we're gonna take our little seitan piece, dredge it in the flour, and actually just having a wet hand and a dry hand to do this. Then we're gonna add it into the non-dairy milk, and then we're gonna go right into the breadcrumbs. And if you noticed, I switched hands. Well, now I'm using both hands. I don't know what I was doing, but I find that having a wet hand and a dry hand is better, and I like to make my dry hand my dominant hand. And then we're just gonna place them onto a dish while we prepare them all. So they look something like this when they are done. Now, we are going to add half a tablespoon of olive oil into a nice big pan, and we are going to pan fry these actually for like 2 to 3 minutes per side, and then we're going to bake them. Doing this is going to help to give that fried texture without actually deep frying them. You don't have to do this, you can skip it if you like, but it does add a little something, and it's, you know, it's 1 tablespoon of olive oil. It's not that much for all these nuggets. So they should look nice and golden and crispy, and then give them a flip and just crisp up the other side. Now you're going to place them onto a baking sheet lined with parchment paper, and don't they look so good already? I just added a little extra olive oil anywhere where I felt like maybe they didn't get enough olive oil in the pan. Like I said though, you can just go straight to baking these if you want. We're going to pop them in the oven 425 for about 20 minutes until they are nice and golden and brown and crispy, and they look so good. And now we are ready to eat them. Serve them with any of your favorite dipping sauces, ketchup, barbecue sauce, spicy mayo, whatever you like. They're a crowd pleaser.
This is a recipe for all my friends who don't like to cook, okay? This is made in a slow cooker. It's super easy and minimal prep time. So you're gonna chop up all your veggies. So we're adding in some roughly chopped sweet onion. We're gonna add in some carrots. I cut them on a bias to make it look fancy. Some Yukon Gold potatoes. These are the elite potatoes, okay? I don't wanna hear otherwise. Nothing beats a Yukon Gold potato. And then we're gonna add in some sliced garlic. I just did this all roughly. This is some cubed up seitan. This is gonna be our vegan beef. I will tag the one that I used down below in the description box. If you don't want to use seitan, I have suggestions for you in the blog post. We're gonna add in some low sodium soy sauce. We're gonna add in balsamic vinegar because I don't use any red wine in this recipe, and this kind of adds that same effect. We're gonna add in some tomato paste, or you can use tomato sauce if you don't have tomato paste. Then we're gonna add in some organic sugar just to add in a little bit of sweetness. And we're gonna add in some better than bouillon that I mixed with water. If you wanna use vegetable broth, you could do that too. Either way works, but I do love the better than bouillon. It has a really nice flavor. Add in some bay leaves and dried rosemary, and then finally we're gonna add in like a sprig of thyme, and that is it. Everything is gonna get mixed together now, and that's it. You're done. So easy. See, so you're just gonna pop the top on, and you're gonna cook this on high for 2.5 hours. So after 2.5 hours, it should look something like this. You can see everything is getting soft. We have a flour slurry here, so we just mix some flour and water together. This is gonna help thicken everything up. Mix it all together, and then cook it on high for another hour. And that is pretty much it. After it's done cooking, you're done. It's easy, it's delicious. Of course, make sure to remove your bay leaves and your thyme stems. The little leaves of thyme will fall off, but make sure you kick the stem out. Give it a taste, add any salt and pepper as you feel necessary, and that's it. You have this stew. It's done, it's easy, it's delicious, it's perfect for cold nights, and it's great for meal prep. You can pair this with pretty much anything you like. I, of course, love to have some crusty bread on the side with this for dipping. So good. And you could always add in more vegetables if you like. Again, the blog post covers like everything for how to customize this, but I just love that this meal is so easy to make, but the flavor is so good, and it really takes on that stew flavor that you just you love it. It's so good, you know, like it's just cozy, comforting, nostalgic. And that's it. I plated up. I had a little bit of fresh thyme on top. You could add some fresh parsley if you like. And now you're done. Now you have this delicious meal to enjoy, and everyone's going to think you are a master chef. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next week with another video. Bye.
Start off this seitan, we're gonna make this like how I made the Mongolian beef. So we're gonna add in soy sauce, tomato paste, and mashed chickpeas into a bowl. And I measure out a half a cup of chickpeas and then mash them, just in case you're curious. So we're just gonna mix that up in our bowl until it's well mixed together. Once they're mixed
we are going to add in our dry ingredients. So I have tons of seasonings in here: garlic powder, onion powder, nutritional yeast, parsley, black pepper. It's all listed down below. And then of course we're adding in our vital wheat gluten so that we can make seitan. And we're just going to mix this up all together until it starts to form somewhat of a dough. Then I'm gonna add in about a half a cup of vegetable broth, a little less. It was more like a third of a cup. And I'm gonna start mixing this together. And you're just basically making a dough with this. You want to add in the vegetable broth slowly because once you add in too much, it's just going to be too wet. So I ended up adding in half a cup total and like maybe like a tablespoon, but you just want to have about 3/4 cup set aside. So after I mixed it together with my spatula, I felt like it was ready to be kneaded and I got my hands in there, and you can see it's a little bit dry still. So I go and add in like a touch more vegetable broth. And you're just really looking for like a nice sticky smooth dough. There shouldn't be anything really left on the counter or anything like this, and it should look something like that. So, and I keep pressing it down because it's kind of spongy. So now we are going to cut this into 4 pieces. Yes, I know I just did a terrible job cutting. We don't need to talk about it. And I'm going to use a rolling pin and roll it out. I rolled mine super thin because I used to love my chicken cutlets very thin, and that's how I did it. So it's pretty nice and thin. And I got 4 chicken cutlets, and we're gonna steam them. And when you steam them, they do plump up a little bit. So to steam them is very easy. I just take a big pot, put a strainer on there, and then I'm just gonna lay my seitan cutlets in there. We're gonna steam them for about 20 minutes. I added in about 1 inch of water in there, and I just kind of added in more if I needed it. So while those are steaming, we are going to work on making our breadcrumbs. So I'm using panko breadcrumbs. I think they're just the nicest and the crispiest, and I just like them the best. And then I'm gonna add in a bunch of seasonings: paprika, salt, parsley, garlic powder, onion powder. Again, everything is listed on the recipe and in the description box. And I'm just gonna mix this up together, very simple. Then we're gonna make a batter using chickpea flour. So I'm just taking chickpea flour, and I used the vegetable broth that I had left over since I already measured it out, and then I added in a little more water, equal amounts of chickpea flour to water, and we're just gonna make a nice thick batter. This is gonna act like as if it were an egg. So our seitan cutlets are done steaming. Please be careful, these are going to be very hot when they come out, and I'm just gonna dip it in the batter, let the excess drip off, and then I put my breadcrumbs in a nice big plate so I can just dip the cutlet right in there, and it's gonna look something like this, and we're just going to bread these guys. You may need to add more breadcrumbs as you go along and pick out any chickpea flour bits. Just, you know, I don't like to add too many because then if I feel like I'm left with a bunch of breadcrumbs and I get annoyed, I'm weird. So I'd rather just add more if I need it. So these are them, all 4 of them, nice and breaded. So we're gonna start off by pan frying these, and I'm adding in about 1.5 tablespoons of olive oil. Gonna put this on the bottom of the pan, kind of roll it around, and then we can put our seitan cutlets in there. And these are pretty sturdy now, so you don't have to worry too much about like them ripping or anything like that, just in case you were. And we're just gonna let these fry up nice. Just gonna cook them for about 2 to 3 minutes on each side. They're nice and golden brown. And can we just look at that? Like, that looks gorgeous to me. I was so happy when I flipped these over. So I'm going to take a baking pan, and I'm just gonna add in some tomato sauce. I'm cheating, I'm using store-bought. I'll have the one link down below. That's my absolute favorite, and it tastes so good. So I'm just gonna spread some out with a spatula, probably about like between half a cup and a cup, somewhere in there. And then I'm gonna lay my cutlets out, and they kind of overlapped each other a little bit, but that is okay. And like, these are just so crispy and beautiful. I was so proud of these. Okay, and then I'm gonna add more sauce on top. Again, about like another half cup, 3/4 cup, somewhere in there. Not an exact measurement, depends on how saucy you like your things. And I'm gonna take my spatula, spread that out. Then I use my vegan cheese melting hack to melt a bunch of vegan mozzarella to put on top of here, so that way it got extra gooey. I'll link the video up above if you are curious, and I have measurements down below for how much exact cheese that I used. And that's pretty much it. We are going to now bake this beautiful pan in the oven for 25 minutes and at like 375. I bake it on the middle rack for 15 minutes and then move it up to the top for the last 10 so it gets nice and golden and melty. And can we just look at this? Oh my goodness. Cheesy, ooey, gooey, a little crispy, a little bit burnt, just like perfect. So I made a bunch of spaghetti, and that's what I'm gonna pair this with. And I would say 1 cutlet is a good serving size for like anybody. I mean, if you're a bigger man, you might want 2, or if you want to, I'm not judging you.
So just in case you guys are curious on that, because I know you guys ask me that sometimes, I'm topping it with fresh parsley and vegan parm, and that's it. Doesn't this look beautiful and delicious? It was so good. And I just had to give you guys a little cut. It cuts really nicely. It's a little bit darker inside than actual chicken. Just be ready for that, I guess. And yeah, that's it. To start this off, we're going to add soy sauce, some mashed up chickpeas that you want to get them as smooth as you can. You can even put them in the blender if you want, and some tomato sauce. And we're going to put this all into a bowl, and we're going to mix this together. I used a different brand of chickpeas today, and for some reason they were a lot harder than the other ones I've used, so they didn't get completely smooth. It still works fine, but the smoother you can get your chickpeas, the better. Then we're going to add in our vital wheat gluten, nutritional yeast, and a lot of spices like salt, garlic powder, seasoning, salts, lots of things. It's all down below in the description box. And you are just going to mix it all around. So you're going to get these little like kind of pea-sized crumbly looking things. And then we're going to start to add in our water. So we're going to add in a total half cup of water at the end, but I'm just adding it in nice and slow. And as you can see, the more liquid you add in, the more the gluten will begin to activate, and it kind of becomes stretchy and looks like meaty and a little tendony, and that's what we're going for. We want it to have this sort of like striated look and appearance. So I'm just adding in the water slowly, mixing it around, and then you'll see it'll get to a certain point where you just want to get in there with your hands. So I just dumped the dough out onto a clean counter, and with clean hands we're going to knead it for about a minute, just until it comes together. If it still is not coming together nicely, then you can just add a little more water in, but it should look something like this. And if you have little pieces of the chickpeas falling out and stuff, that's not a big deal. Just brush them to the side. Doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. So it should make a nice smooth ball like this. And I'm just going to cut it in half because I find it easier to work with halves. This makes quite a bit of seitan. So if you make all of this, you're going to get probably about 4 servings of this specific recipe. Or you can freeze half and do something else with it another time. So you just want to take a rolling pin and roll these out pretty thin because we are going to steam them. So roll them nice and thin. Flank steak is usually pretty thin, and I find that I like seitan better when it's a thinner slice. It doesn't get as sort of gummy. So about this thick, maybe like 1/2 inch, and you can just keep like patting it down and rolling it. So these are my 2 little cutlets all done, and now we're going to steam them. So you're just going to put about 1/2 cup of water into the bottom of a pot, add a strainer on top. On top of that, you're going to add the seitan cutlets, and then you're going to put a lid on it and steam it for like 25 minutes. Flipping it halfway through so both sides get steamed evenly. It's going to get chubby, and yeah, that's it. So while those steam, we are going to make a sauce. So I'm adding in soy sauce, water, some chili paste to make it spicy. This is optional. Maple syrup, and garlic powder and ginger powder, and that is it. A super simple sauce to make. You're just going to mix this all together, and that's it. That's our sauce. Easy and delicious. So once your seitan is all steamed, you can just slice that up. And as you can see, I'm slicing it really nice and thin. This is just how I think it tastes better. This is sort of similar to the cut that Mongolian beef has. So this is what we're going for. And if you want it to be a little thicker, you can make it thicker. But I just think when it's thinner, it kind of sears up a little better, gets a little crispier. So just, yeah, cut it all into little pieces. And then if you have anything super big that you want, you can also cut them in halves. So these are them. They look like this. And now we are just going to put a little bit of cornstarch on them, probably only about like 2 tablespoons. And this is going to help it to get really crispy and really nice. And this is optional, I guess, but it just kind of makes a little coating on the outside. So once it looks something like this, we are ready to cook them. Just make sure they're like all nice and coated. And like I said, don't worry about those pieces of chickpeas that are falling out. So then into a pan, we're going to add some sesame oil, about 1 tablespoon. Just drizzle it all in there. And then we are going to just let that heat up. You can see it's nice and hot now because it's kind of moving like water. And we're gonna add in those little seitan pieces, and these are gonna fry up, get nice and crispy. You just give it a little toss, make sure all the pieces are coated in oil nicely, and you just let that cook for like 5-ish minutes, you know, not too long, on a medium heat. And it's nice because some of the pieces are going to start to get browned up, which I think tastes a lot better when there's sort of like a crisp on here. It just has like a better mouth feel to me, better texture. So now we're going to slowly add our sauce in. So I'm adding half to start off with, and I know it's liquidy, but because of all the sugars and the maple syrup and everything, this is going to caramelize up and get really nice and thick. So I added half and just kind of tossed everybody in it, made sure everybody got some flavor on there, and then I added the rest in. I just like to work in halves because it makes things get distributed more evenly, in my opinion. So then you're just going to toss it around, and we're going to let this cook on a low heat for like 15 to 20 minutes. Just watch it, make sure nothing burns or anything, but just low and slow heat is the name of the game here. And yeah, that's pretty much it. You just kind of let it hang out and let the sauce really cook and thicken up. It'll get nice and caramelized on the outside of some of these pieces of seitan. It's awesome. So once it's all done, it's gonna look something like this. As you can see, it's nice and dark. It really looks like steak. I think so. And I put this over a nice big bed of white rice. Obviously, you don't have to do that if you don't want to. You can just toast with vegetables. And I just sprinkled it with green onions and extra red pepper flakes and some sesame seeds. And just look at how beautiful that is. It's like really looks so good. It looks flavorful. It looks juicy. There's some nice little caramelized burnt pieces, which I love. That's my favorite part. And yeah, that's it. This is it. It's really easy to make. It is so delicious. You guys have to try it. And just, it's just so good. You guys are going to love it.